Hey, all right. Look, I got my man. Look, it's kind of good to be back in the zone with none other than, I got to call you this, Joe Ugly. But,
Yeah.
but I got to say something. You got a very, very kind heart, which is why I think you and I have been able to build. And look, we've kind of faded off in the middle of this whole COVID thing for the last maybe a year or so, but we had some bondage there, man. We actually spent a good day together in LA. Oh, a
Yeah.
year and a half ago, year ago. So, dude, it's good to be back with you, man. Glad to see you're doing well, brother.
Good to see you, sir. Good to see you.
So right before we jumped in here, you said, I'm not dead yet. I am still alive in the middle of this craziness. So how have you been dealing with this craziness? I think, I like to jump into the meat and potatoes, right? The world is in shambles right now,
Yes.
depending on your mindset, which I'm a big fan of. But for you, how has this shaken your world up? Like, talk to me about what's going on in the middle of this for you.
I do believe no matter what your mindset is, the world is in shambles. The world is in shambles. Like whether you're in shambles is a whole other conversation,
That's true.
right?
That's
You know what I
true.
mean?
Yep,
I
I'm
mean,
with you.
but like, there's no way to look at the way the world is right now and not be like, this is a little bit different than what we've dealt with for like in my entire life. Like this is
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah.
Uh, as far as I've dealt with it, I started off my COVID private time, like if you want to call it that, the isolation. I jumped in. I immediately was going to. I was working out like 6 days a week, and I took a class on Coursera or Coursera. I can't remember how to pronounce it,
Yeah, you're
which
good.
is like an online school. And I took a class called The Science of Well-Being that I took. That's taught at Yale. So I took a class at Yale, which I passed, and which I joked with my mom, like I'm like finally went to Yale. Look at that. And then so that was a really good class, a class that I think you'd enjoy, where they talk about like mindset and they talk about how experiences are worth more than material items, and the idea of like meditation and focusing your energy in a positive direction, and how just by taking small steps forward in your life, you can improve your life, right? So it was all the things that I think you and I have talked about on different levels, but nice reminder of all those things. I did that. And then uh, I was working on a couple projects beforehand, before things went weird, and so like the world shut down a little bit. Those things have been put on hold, and I wouldn't say stopped, but definitely have been harder to move forward when you can't
Sure.
have a group of people around to work
Mhm.
on projects. And I transferred. I taught class in this room once a week, acting classes, and that obviously had to stop. So I transferred over all my energy into Zoom classes. And now instead of teaching one class in my living room, I teach two classes a week over Zoom. And it's interesting how the world has expanded because I haven't had to have people here,
Sure.
So I have students now like in Serbia, uh, Russia, England, Portugal sometimes, Boston, Chicago. So that's kind of like opened up new doors for me too in an interesting way, and kind of made me have to reevaluate also other things, which I'm not sure how it's been where you are, but like Los Angeles is a very expensive town to live in,
Yeah.
which is where we live for
Yeah.
those of you
Yeah.
who don't
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
who are
Yeah.
watching.
Yeah.
And LA is outrageous expensive, and I don't feel like I need to be here anymore because my whole world has been changed by this COVID experience, and made me reevaluate everything that I've been taught about what I need to have in my life has changed, I think, a little bit too. So, yeah.
I was just catching an article about an hour ago about Ben Shapiro was picking up. He was moving out of the Valley Village area, which is in the Valley, right? And going to Nashville. And dude, you would be one of tens of thousands that would be reconsidering a relocation. Hey, come to Vegas, man. By the way, we got a beautiful place here.
I'm not lying to you. That's
Not too
Vegas is
expensive,
in my
man.
top. Vegas is in my top five. Vegas is 100% in my
Come
top five.
on, man. Bring it out here. We'd have too much fun. You'd probably teach me a couple of things.
It's on my short list because I can drive to LA from Vegas. So like, there's
Yeah.
something really great about if I work, I can in a last minute situation, I can get right to LA, which makes me a local still in
Yeah.
LA, and that's kind of important. Although on my short list, and let's go down it, right? I mean, besides LA, if I was to leave, and we're talking about beyond Big Bear or whatever things that I've thought about that, but Vegas, obviously, Flagstaff, I think is kind of nice, and Scottsdale. I kind of like Arizona, but uh, Austin is definitely high up on my list. I would love to live in Austin,
Yeah. Yeah.
except I'm not a big fan of the rest of Texas as a whole, but
Uh-huh.
Austin I love. And then we start leaving the country. Then we're looking at Mexico or Europe. And I
Yes.
I'm like, I don't need to be in the country anymore right now.
Yeah, yeah.
You know?
That's great, man. And I think for you, for people, you're a well-traveled, well-experienced individual. Lots of, I mean, across the boards, arts and entertainment, specifically in the acting, directing, producing arena, amongst other things. When you said something in there that talked about, kind of repositioning and the whole world's crumbling, how does someone that has done a lot, accomplished a lot like you, at this stage in your life, have the mental aptitude to a to basically have the flexibility of mind to adjust and say, okay, we got to recreate here. Like, you're so used to living away and doing things a certain way, and then it all comes together and you're like, wow, I got to adjust again. Like, what's the process in that for you that somebody could pick up, where they may not be as sure, they may not have had the experience, and you're in there like, man, okay, great. Because I think you told me you're over 50, right? Not to bring up the age thing, man, but
I'm
I
79 years old.
79,
Yeah,
79. All right, cool. So let's just say 79, and you're rocking and rolling. You look as good as ever for 79. But
fantastic.
having that presence of mind to say, okay, like, I've done this for X period of time, and damn, I got to do it again. Like, what's up? Like, how do you move through that?
Well, okay. I'm really 52 for anyone who cares. But for me, like, it's interesting. I would argue a couple things about this as a debate to have. One, on the plus side of what I do, I'm used to reinventing all the time. I think being an entertainer, I go project to project all the time. I'm used to going back to zero. I've been doing this for like a very long time now. And when you take a look at it, every time I even have a great job, even if I'm, on doing news circuits or, Good Morning, Los Angeles or whatever appearances, or getting paid to show up at Comic-Cons, at some point that dies down and then you have to regroup and figure out what the next thing's going to be. So it isn't that hard for me to shift, because it's not like I never had a stable job. So it's not like I'm scared of regrouping that way. It's more about like, well, where would I regroup to, and what does that mean in general? Right?
Sure.
So I think that makes it easy. What makes it hard on the other end of the spectrum is that I feel like if I had more success or less success, the decision would be easier to make, right? And this is just kind of like how mindsets work, right? Which I know you like talking about. If you continuously fail, it's easy to try to reinvent, because you're starting from ground zero, and desperation forces us to reevaluate, right? You either just go into an abyss, or you have to figure out what you're going to do next, right? That's how that failure and depression works, when things hit like that. If you have great success, then you have one of two choices. You either sit there and go like, they broke, don't fix it, or you go like, I can do anything I want to do, right? So I think those are kind of like the things that happen. I feel like the success that I've had creates a kind of a concern where you're like, if I leave, will people forget me? Like, do I lose the ground I've made? Right. And I have to go all the way back to zero. And can I afford to do that? Right. Which is part of the conversation. In certain towns, where does that benefit me? Where does it not? If I move to a town like Austin, I probably have more credits than a lot of the acting teachers there if I wanted to teach full time. I probably have a much stronger resume than a lot of people in Austin. Not all, they're great actors in Austin. But there's also but you also have to show up and kind of like market yourself. You don't have any like local connections. People will be like, we have our people, and and you have to like reformat that. And I think that is kind of like a little nerve wracking. Or also, like, as an actor director, like, what other pockets like Austin, New Orleans, Chicago, there are places where I could go where I could kind of easily reinvent myself, where like, they'd be excited to have a new face that has the credits that I have, but at the same time, it would also be jarring, So is it worth that shift? Is the discussion about picking up and reinventing.
Sure.
But I don't think, for me, when you talk about the simple mindset, it's just, as not being scared about the unknown, and not thinking that what you have is so valuable that you can't rebuild it someplace else. Right. Some people are fearless. I am always shocked when people are like, I'm gone. And you're like, where? What? I'm sure people are like, I'm just, like you said, I'm just going to move to Nashville. I'm like, yeah. Are you crazy? It's like, I mean, I definitely feel the need to plan more than that. I don't know if I'll feel that way after next Tuesday, but we'll see if I'll be ready to pack up and go,
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, man, look, I think wherever you go, you got a special charm. So that's what matters, man. Now, when you talk a lot about the teaching and the acting coaching right now and going out there and finding that next place. Obviously talking to a lot of people from many different places right now, whether that's right there in your backyard,
Right.
no pun intended, in your living room or over Zoom like we are now.
Mhm.
What are you telling them in this current climate, right? As students,
Right.
future, works in progress of entertainment and the arts, because that's where you specialize. And by the way, you're not just talented, and that's what I love about you. You're not just talented in this domain of entertainment with acting and directing. Like, dude, you have so much more to you, which I mean, we could spend days on this. And I really mean that, because we've had conversations where, I've talked to you about the whole relationship and being able to be a manager to your, like, there's so many pillars of progress that mean more than what you're really doing in there. So I just want to kind of shed light on that with who you are amongst being sober, right?
Right.
I think you're still sober. I just want to make sure that COVID hasn't got you back down that direction.
No,
Uh,
no way.
okay, good. Um, and all of the other great qualities that you have. But when you're helping someone now, like we are on Zoom, what's the message? Like, what are you telling them in terms of how to stay upbeat and
Yeah.
find that specialty in staying up and making sure you're committed and all these great things? So see, I'm just putting that out there kind of as
No,
a
it's a
place
good
to catch
question.
on to for you to share with us how you're communicating back to the world right now.
It's a good question. Look, I mean, you and I both have the gift of gab. We could talk for days, but it's like that's I mean, people, they can leave us in a room, we'd starve before we stop talking.
It'd be a little
Uh,
crazy. It'd be all over the place, but we would
yeah,
get back to a point eventually.
yeah, it's good that we don't do cocaine together.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh,
Yeah,
but if you move to Vegas, there'd be those memories though, because everybody knows that's
sure.
the old stomping grounds here. I used to blow a bunch of lines, man. I would be
I
like,
just,
whoa,
yeah, you and
woo.
I would talk 4 days later, like, are they still talking in the other room? Yeah. How do we still, right?
That'd be fun.
But yeah, so I think it's important, talking about the sobriety a little bit, it's important for me to constantly give back. That's part of what I try to do. And whether that's by teaching class or being a soundboard for people when they feel like they're stuck or depressed about this COVID stuff, or how to help people focus on what to do next, is part of, like, I feel my responsibility as a human being, right? So, like, I feel like that's super important. Uh, you know, because it's easy during this time of being trapped and feeling like, I don't know how your circle in Vegas is working, but plenty of actors in LA are Uber drivers and they are hurt, and waiters in restaurants and
Wow.
bartenders, I mean,
Yeah,
so
I
a lot
didn't
of my
think of that.
students, yeah,
Wow.
a lot of my
Yeah.
students are service industry people, so they can make their own schedule. And so they have been tremendously hurt by this, like what's happened in the system. Um, when everyone was getting $600 extra a week from the government, people were like, I'm not working. I'm just going to focus on, a lot of people said, I'm going to focus on my craft. And I ended up with a few students who were new, who were looking to be like, gung ho, like, I'm not working. I'm making extra money. Let's put it back into the arts. That is now trailing off. People are running out of unemployment, right? Things are not going as well for people, I think, in general in LA. A lot of places are still not opening up. Unemployment's still kind of like running rampant. Um, I've done things from ranging from lowering my prices to my classes to make it more affordable for people, to having some people who are really broken, me being like, you don't have to pay this month. Just keep showing up, right? Keep showing up and being here. Just be here, I'm going to go away for a few days. You'll watch my dogs when I go. You know what I mean? And kind of like
Yeah.
barter trade.
Yeah.
You can't afford class, make me a lasagna.
Right.
You know what I mean? Yeah. And I do that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So there are ways to make sure that your community stays safe and positive and focused, and make them feel like they're not being taken, that you're not being taken advantage of, and they're not feeling bad about what they're doing. You find a balance, right? And I do a lot of that. As far as like my advice to them, I tell my students who are actors, which all my students are actors. They get frustrated. A lot of them are like, I'm just not going to take class right now because there's nothing happening. I go, yeah, but that doesn't help you prepare for when things do happen again, which is a big discussion. I go, you should be in class. Like, if you don't study when things start up again, it's like sitting on the bench as a baseball player for 9 months. What are you going to do? You're going to just get up to bat and think you're going to hit a home run,
Right.
And only one person gets that job. And do you think you're the best person in the world? Like, it's like, I mean, that's, have some humble approach to kind of like your craft and getting better. I feel that way. I try to force myself to do more work. I did a movie last month because I was like, I need to get back on set, even though things are tough. A COVID safe set that had less than 10 people, that was 2 actors for like 80 pages. And that was kind of like doing a play. And I was like, this is going to force me to work hard again. And I feel like that's all important, right? Staying focused, find a habit. And when I tell people all the time as actors, and I say this to them, whether it was COVID or not, do 2 things a day for your career so you feel good about yourself. So you're not just floundering. And whether that is working out, if that's one thing, just stay in shape, or it's watching a TV show you haven't seen before. If it is writing a little bit, try to work on a script that you've always wanted to write, or reaching out to a director, and just saying hi on Facebook. Like if you do 2 things a day, you will constantly be moving forward. And that is so important in order to kind of like have success, I think.
Yeah, yeah. No, I'm with you there, man. And I think, look, dude, the truth is that, you teach actors specifically in the domain of entertainment, but I think that at some level we're all actors, right? In life, at some way, somehow. So some of the practical skills that you're working with these people on, like you've been up and down Hollywood for a long time. What do you think are some of the skills that maybe you've learned from behind the curtain that an everyday person could borrow or that would be applicable to somebody that's listening right now, right? I mean, whether that's communication,
Right.
whether that's impromptu, whether that's memory, in a world where I mean, look, I'm a skills guy, man. I'm always trying to get better with skills, regardless, whether it's communication, whether that's interviewing, whether that's studying, learning. I mean, anything, right? So, in your experience, what have you seen kind of that was like maybe something that stands out in a way where it's like, damn, yeah, you know what? That would help those folks. What do you think?
Let's start with the ones that I'm not as good at, that I'd like to be better at.
I like that. Yeah, yeah,
Right?
that's a good, yeah,
Let's start with the
perfect.
things that I feel like I struggle with, right?
Yeah,
I struggle with it's not always about you, right? Right? And
yeah,
that sometimes things happen and you have no control over them, and you have to understand. One of my favorite things is obviously grant me the serenity, to accept the things I cannot change,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
Right?
yeah. The
They,
12 steps, baby, right there, right there. I remember that from AA all day.
of course, right. Accept the things you cannot change the things you can, and have the wisdom to know the difference, right?
Okay,
And that,
so yes, but so hold that thought because I'm with you on that. Like I feel what you're talking about. It's not about you. Let's go into a little bit more. What are you meaning by that? So like you're just in life and you're thinking like it's a pity party. You're feeling victimized
right,
at
a little,
times, and by the way, we're human because I experienced this too. I'm like, damn,
yeah,
man, fuck, let's
yeah.
fix this.
Yeah,
Um,
we can swear here. Let's fucking
yeah,
swear.
yeah,
So
yeah,
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 look.
yeah.
Today I got a phone call. A friend of mine's directing a movie. The money people didn't think I was famous enough for the job. To be straight out honest about
Okay.
the situation, they pushed back. He wanted me for the job, and they did everything they could to make sure I wasn't the guy. Right?
Wow. Wow. Okay.
Now, yeah. You say wow, right? But it's
Okay.
like, but they don't know me. If
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
did, they might hire me. I don't know. But it's like, but they decided, like, and they changed the role to something different, and they made it into something else because they fought him. Right now, they might have fought him because it was a power play, and they didn't want to give him the power that he wanted. They might have fought him because they felt like they could get somebody. They might have felt like they could get somebody more famous than me, right? I mean, I'm a recognizable face, but I'm not a huge name, and I get that, And so, but for the amount of money they were offering, I was insulted that they just didn't offer it to me, and I have to sit there and be like, it's not about me. Like, it's not about me. Like, they should have offered it. Now, I also have to look at the other side of it too and remind myself. I go, maybe it was the wrong job for me. I wasn't thrilled about the material. I wasn't thrilled about the money. I wasn't thrilled about what they asked me to do. It's like, and sometimes you have to listen to those signals too and go like, if those strikes were already there, then maybe I should just let it go. So my first instinct is to go like, I'm going to write a letter to those idiots. It's like, I'm going to let them know how
Ego.
stupid they are.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And I have to like let myself know that that doesn't fix anything, man. Like, that doesn't change anything. It doesn't change anything. And so letting that go, if we want to be specific about what it is, letting go of things, that is I don't know about you. I carry resentment sometimes for years, and I have to like fight myself to like let it go and not have it like really ruin and contaminate other parts of my life, because that angst starts to bleed over into other territories. It starts me questioning other things that I've done and being like, that's like that thing. And then you start like really building up some negativity. And I really try not to let that happen.
Do you feel like that's because you're better than what you're currently doing or where you're currently at, or because you have more worth? Like, if you were able to dig down into that, what's the source of that? Because like sometimes I feel like that, right? So like, I mean, good, in being human, and again, it's part of the challenging part of growth, and just looking at what we've got, all this vanity, everything out there. It's like watching that guy. I'm like, damn, I'm more talented than that person.
Yeah.
He's up there. I'm like, I must have done something wrong. But and then that, like you said, it's like, oh, just that tension in the brain. So do you look at that as like it's because you have more in you, or
I wrote to my director friend who wrote to me. He said, don't feel bad. And I wrote to him, I go, I don't feel bad. I go, that person not hiring me, that's not on me. That's on them. I know my worth. I'm good. I go, don't worry about it. And that's what I wrote back, which I felt like was an appropriate response to let him know, like, I'm not sweating and I know where I stand. I'm not feeling slighted by them,
right?
But if we were going to like look at it, like, yeah, man, it's like I've busted my butt. Like, how hard do I have to work, to get to rub a couple nickels together is kind of Hollywood's a weird, tricky thing. Like I have over 100 credits on different things. And in other businesses, if you had 25 years of service, they'd be giving you a corner office. And where I am, I just go back to zero every day. You know what I mean?
Interesting. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So there is no one sits there and goes, Bob does a great job. If you have this huge resume and people still go, I still haven't seen you say these words.
Right.
Before. You're like,
yeah. It's
okay.
safe. It's safe to say that outside of a few people, even from my own observation, that just kind of own the headlines every day, right? It's like they just constantly stay up there. Everybody else is fighting for their life every day, man. They're constantly trying to scrap back in and get back into a position or a role, and that's the difficulty of the nature of Hollywood in terms of where you're at, right? What contributes to that? Is it talent? Is it work ethic? Is it who you know? Is it a combination of all those?
We're opening up a huge can of worms, but to give you a quick rundown on how I feel about like the industry, where I think we're at is that, we went from like 4 channels to like 500 channels, like in a short period of time, and then streaming service also, right? And eyeballs are being spread all over the place. Not to mention kids are watching YouTube and kind of like, tutorial videos, looking through stuff.
Right.
So ratings have gone down across the board as far as like how many eyeballs are on a show. When you have that happen, people want to get paid the same amount for shows, but you have a smaller audience watching a TV show. Therefore, advertising dollars go down, as you know from advertising. If advertising dollars go down, you have less money for the show. If you have less money for the show, everyone gets paid less. But my time to do that still stays the same, right? I can't speed up my process of acting. So, rates have been cut down for a lot of actors who are working workhorse guys. If you're not somebody who can greenlight a project or pull eyeballs and you're just a working person, no matter how good you are, the price has gone down for you. And so people want to pay you less. The money people don't want to take less money, so it trickles down. And a lot of the time it trickles down to the actor. And then because of that, also plenty of people want to be actors. We also live in a world where you used to have to live in LA or New York if you want to be an actor, but you can, like I said before, leave this town or be somewhere else and submit digitally through tape and just kind of send it in. Mm-hmm. I also think that the level of acting in general has gone up in the last 10 years because everyone now has a camera in their pocket. So everybody has become somewhat comfortable talking on film. We're doing it right now, and it happens every day. So what is natural as an actor, now everybody feels. We used to work really hard. It took me years of training in college and learning how to act on stage and then getting on film and being like, oh, that's too much. Like, we need to bring it down. I need to understand my frame. But we all now subconsciously know how to be actually natural on film. We understand framing. We understand not only framing, but where our eye line should be and where our face looks the best. Look, we have 1 billion girls on Instagram who now know how to model. You know what I mean? Right. Like, where people used to just be uncomfortable in front of the camera. How comfortable is everybody on camera now?
Sure.
So that has changed the bar of like what is acceptable as an actor, right? And I think a lot of people think like, well, anybody can just act now. Well, that's also not true, right? Sure. So, you end up with a lot of bad actors because people sit there and go, like, just hire Bob. He knows how to speak. I think that's also not acting. So you end up in this weird kind of thing. And I think that's driven the price down, and other crazy stuff's happened where like healthcare has gone up. So like the unions, like healthcare plan is now like unaffordable for most actors because they're being paid less and what they have to make to qualify has gone up, and premiums have gone up. So like people are now suffering and kind of like being trapped, being like, I don't know what I can do to make a living. Actors who it used to be easy to make $50,000 as an actor every year, and that is not the case anymore.
Mm.
It's now you have to work twice as hard for half the money, and that's just kind of like the way supply and demand works.
Yeah, it's tough, man. I mean, look, I think the gap has increased where it's like you're either making it or you're down here, and it's like, oh God, Lee, that's rigid, and it's not a place that you want to be. Um, which I've always said, look, I'm a believer, again, assuming that a couple of things are checked off where you can have talent. If you fully commit to something and you work your ass off like there's no end to it, and that's what you all in want, you'll make it at some point. I'm not talking about being a 6'5" basketball player if you're 5'9", not talking about that. But if acting is what you want to do, then the daily activities and the actions that you take every day and those minutes and those hours over the 24-hour period matter, right? That commitment to that success. Now, will it take 5 years or 10 years? Who the hell knows, right? But that effort usually helps that person end up navigating those waters. So,
But still, acting's still a weird thing because you still have to it does take talent. It has to be right place, right time, and agents and managers working to get the right people in front of you. It's tough. If you want to be in entertainment and you do that, eventually you'll realize maybe I need to write more. Maybe I need to buy like a camera. Maybe I should shoot my own stuff. Maybe I should make a web series. There are avenues you can approach if you want to be more creative. If you just are going to wait for someone to discover you, it is much longer because it's like hard to do that, I think.
yeah. Yeah, what I like about you, man, is that you really have a gift of educating. I remember spending that day with you in LA and kind of you just walking me inside. You were talking about how you do your students in there and you train, and just in getting to know you. You have a Not everybody's a good leader and or teacher or trainer, right? You can be good at, like, somebody can be good at acting, but to put them in front of a group and then have them articulate how to do that and teach somebody else how to do it, dude, that's night and day, right? So I think you have a very big sweet spot in it. And I'm probably sure that you're already knowing this at this point. It's like, well, so like, how can I just do this on a much more macro scale? Because you just get that natural part of you, man. So that's awesome. But I don't want to forget about what we were talking about just a few minutes ago.
We'll go back in one second. Let me
Yeah,
finish. I'll
yeah,
finish. I'll comment on that.
you
I
started
agree.
going. Yeah,
No, I agree with you. We'll go back. Just keep in mind where we're going to go
yeah,
back to.
yeah.
But as far as teaching goes, that's the thing is I think there are a lot of bad teachers, which is how I started teaching. And I feel like, that is a big deal. I also feel like the world has really gotten to a weird place in the entertainment industry. I kind of like to make more money teaching than acting, but I just love acting and it's what I love to do. So the question turns into do I pack up and move and go someplace and just teach, right? Would I be happy with that, right? Because
What makes a bad teacher? I hate to interject there, but I'm curious to know, you said there's bad teachers. Like, in your eye,
right.
what are you seeing that makes someone good or decent versus like, oh my God, like
The most obvious one is the saying, it's like give someone a fish, they eat for a day, teach them how to fish, they eat for a lifetime.
mm-hmm.
Mistake number one for teaching is giving somebody a fish,
Okay.
right? You need to lead, you need to teach people a system, you need to teach them, technique, right? You need to teach them how to do it, right? At the end of the day, you take a dance class, you need to understand the basics of dance to be able to study different kinds of dance. Or if you want to play basketball, you need to understand how to shoot a basketball. You tell them if this run up and down the court, you'll be fine. It's crazy, right?
Yeah.
So technique is a huge understanding different techniques and that different people have different needs. There is no one perfect technique. There are schools that tell you that there is. That is like a corner man for a fighter being like, you need to hit people the way I tell you to. No, every fighter has special gifts, and you need to focus on those gifts and then focus on their strengths and their weaknesses in order to make them the best fighter possible. I try to operate like a corner man for a fighter. I try to figure out what your weaknesses are and what your strengths are, and how do we maximize that to get you in the best position to get a job, right? So for me, I think bad teachers go my way or the highway. You're not doing it right. That's not how you say that line. And we could say that's negativity. I don't think that's what it is. I think it's people just think this is what I teach. I think a really good teacher is fluid, and understands that everybody has different needs, and understands that, the way I do something is not the way you do something, right?
Yeah.
I can teach you how you need to maximize things and what that does for you. But if you and I auditioned for the same role, we would do it differently. You're not like me, and if a girl auditioned, who was very sweet and sensitive and cute and whatever, she'd be different too. You know what I mean? Right. So we just got to sit there and realize, like, I think that a good teacher recognizes those things. Number one, that's the biggest thing.
I dig it. So,
And also on top of that, besides that, conveying, understanding, seeing what you do, right? And goes back to a lot of things you and I talk about, encouraging the good things, right? Pointing out the bad things, not making anybody feel less than, making them realize that they're growing with you and not being belittled by you. Lots of teachers tear people apart to make them feel crappy. I do not think that's a good idea, but you also can't be like, that's great about everything either. Like, there's some honest growth that goes on and something that's encouraging and enjoyable in the process.
It kind of goes back to what you started off with, kind of the challenge area a few minutes ago, which was, about you. So it's like the teachers are coming in there, the leaders, the coaches are coming in there, making it about them, and they only wanted to serve their agenda, and it's not helping the students. So it's like that disappointment for the student, where it's like, God, are you trying to help me, or are you just trying to help yourself? So
Yeah.
it's interesting little approach there. But you were talking about that whole point where it's not about you, dude, when you're talking about the role that you were just recently a part of. The money guys didn't want to do it because of you, and you were going down. You were going to give me some more lists to that, as far as like some other things that you were kind of observing about yourself, maybe that weren't so healthy, or that you can do better.
Yeah.
What track were you taking us down there? Because I want, look, man, I'm always about, like,
Yeah.
I don't want to always talk about the good stuff. I want to talk about the shitty stuff and the stuff that you suck at too, because people need to relate in some capacity, where it's like, look, it ain't all roses and dandelions, even though we can sure make that up and put that out
Sure.
there. But I think helping somebody understand, like, oh, that's what he went through, or that's what he struggles with, makes me feel like, oh, I could do that too. Or, yeah, that seems like something I can conquer. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Okay,
I mean,
good.
look, I mean, I said the first thing about, like, sitting there, it's not about me. And then secondly, like, letting things go is the number two thing that I think I need to, I try to work on as much as I can. So I don't carry resentment. You know, I think also trying to look at the brighter side of things when jobs come your way, and not sit there and immediately start to get negative about them is a big thing. So to be like, this is stupid. I don't like this. I don't want to do this. This is dumb.
Right.
Trying not to, like, judge myself and the choices I make. Those are all things. I have a tendency, which I think is a good and a bad thing. There's a couple of things that I do. I get fired up about stuff, and I speak my mind. I've lost jobs for, like, lighting somebody up for them feeling that they're not doing their job. You know what I mean? Because I see in corporate businesses, I see people making $250,000 who are complete idiots all the time. And I'm always amazed, or, drive a fancy car and they wearing, Ray-Bans, and they're like, hey, and you talk to them, you're like, they know nothing. Like, yeah. I don't know how they got to where they got to. And I don't have a problem telling people, like, no, like, I don't have it. You don't tell me, you don't get to tell me what to do if you don't know what you're doing when I'm doing this job. That happens a lot to me. That also makes me super independent and capable of doing things on my own. You know what I mean? And also, like, rising above, because I feel like I'm not afraid to kind of, like, take that risk on my own and tell you what I'm thinking. Smart people usually encourage that for me, and stupid people are like, I don't want to work with that guy. I'm like, yeah, because you don't know what you're doing. That happens a lot.
Yeah.
And it's a positive and a negative. And I would say that the other thing too for me is that I have to I constantly struggle with I wouldn't say self-doubt, because I don't have that, but, like, how to work around something when I'm like, I'm not sure what the answer is. I can make a decision on a $1 million commercial set like that, and I have a hard time picking out my t-shirt for the day.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Yeah, it's a weird balance thing where I'm like, some things just get me completely flustered, and that also leans into, like, technology has gotten to a point where I can't understand everything anymore. I feel like my mom. She's like, my mom called me this morning. She's like, how do I put a picture into the phone? I'm sending an email, but I need a picture in that email. How do I get to the picture? I'm like, go do this, and I can do that. But I have to build a self-tape studio now, because audition rooms are kind of going away. So I have to film everything myself to submit tapes. And that is hard for multiple reasons. One, technology-wise, I don't know exactly what I need. And then two, I'm not happy having to turn on a camera when I'm trying to be a character and then walking in front of the camera and just being that person. It takes me a lot of energy to play a role that isn't really me, So when I push the camera, I don't all of a sudden go like, well, what happens here? Like, it takes time to develop something,
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
it's a hard process. That's
There's
what
a unique thing that you just said right there about being a character in terms of, presenting yourself for a role. Um, I've heard on many occasions that there would be actors or actresses that play the role so well that they actually become the
Mhm.
person that's in that role, whether it's like, you walk on set, you're like, hey, Joe, and you're like, Joe ain't here. It's that person that you're playing in that particular role. And I
Correct.
always thought that was fascinating. I'm sure you've seen that. To what degree does someone have to be involved in their craft to let that go in your world? And is that the norm, or is that the exception? Is that something where, an everyday person like you or I can say, look, today I'm not feeling good. I have a nickname, by the way. I call me Superman. I don't know if you knew that, but that's my nick. So it's like, if I'm feeling like shit, I'm like, I'm Superman. Manny ain't here, right? So I pop into this person. I'm like, let's go. In the world of what you do, is it something that like can be done by the ordinary everyday person? And I kind of talk to me through what your observation is in that, because I thought that was fascinating. I've always thought that was very fascinating. It's like an
Any,
alter ego, right?
anybody can do anything they want to do. I mean,
Yep.
we choose to do what we want to do. I mean, it's a. You ever been to like a? Here's the thing. Yeah, you ever been to like a hypnotist show?
Yeah, I have a couple
Right?
times. Yep. Yep.
And they pull people on stage and they hypnotize them.
Yep.
And sometimes they pull people on and they tell them to sit down.
Yep.
I got pulled
Absolutely.
on stage once for a show like that, and the hypnotist was like, told me to sit down. And I go, why? And he goes, after the show, I go, why did you tell me to sit down? And he goes, well, the fact that you're questioning it tells me a lot. He's like, but he's like, all you need to do is look in your eyes to know that you don't want to be hypnotized.
Okay. Okay.
And that's a big part of it. Like, you don't act like a chicken on stage unless you want to act like a chicken on stage. Like, that's a choice you're making. Right? You have to want to be hypnotized and know what that's going to bring to you, and then be like, oh my God, that was crazy. I didn't even believe I did that. Like, but you could have done it if you wanted to. You
It's
could walk around.
fascinating.
Yeah, you're making that choice. You're letting him guide you someplace, or her guide you someplace. And I think that's a similar kind of thought process. I tell people, people go like how do you get to that place that you're crazy? Right? Well, I do a lot of research for a character, and I break them down, and I have to think about where they're from and who they are and what kind of choices they make and what their mindset is. And I dive in as far as I can go. Like when I did Happy, I was trying to be this schizophrenic, crack smoking Santa Claus, and I had to I didn't go smoke crack, but I know what it's like to be a junkie, and I
Yeah.
know and I know what kind of bad decision making is. And I had to think. I studied some schizophrenia, and I had to think about where his anger came from and why did he want to kidnap these children. You have to answer all of these questions in order to play the character successfully. You need to dive in, and basically, for all intents and purposes, you need to clear your hard drive and load in all this new stuff, right? It's the idea of
Wow.
regrooving a record. It's the idea of we make choices. I have what I consider as like a house that I live in, right? My body's like my house. I choose where that furniture goes. I choose which doors I have open and which doors I have closed, right?
Yeah.
Which doors I lock, which doors, do I feng shui the place? All these choices that I make. So when I have a new character, I then do that. I move the furniture around. I open new doors. I shut doors in my head of what I allow myself, what kind of foods I like. Does he have a limp? Did he get, if I audition to play a motorcycle guy, does he have a limp? Has he had an accident? Is he in pain? Has he had a lot of fights? Is he sober? Is he not? Does he
Mm.
still drink? Is he violent? Is he kind? Right? And I ask myself all these questions. So if I start developing that, you start becoming him when you're getting ready for the role, when you have the role. And you can't just be in your dressing room all day long and play a character like that. And, somebody be like, all right, Bob, I'll see you later. And then walk out there and be like, all right. Like we talked about, now I'm the guy. It's just not, you have to inhabit him,
Right.
really trust that inhabiting. And if you don't, it's hard to dive in as far as you want to. There are people who are just movie stars who just play themselves on film. They memorize the lines, they go out there and they sit there and they just act like they're acting.
What's the difference? Hold on. So they're just movie stars. They act like, so they're just being themselves. Like I'm just being myself, right? I'm just stepping in. They gave
Yeah,
me lines. They're
acting natural. Like the Beatles song goes, I'm just going to act naturally, right?
okay.
There are
Verse.
people who are so charming that they just walk out there and they're like, hey, good to see you, right? But everything's great, very natural.
Let me
Don't,
jump in. I'll give you an example of something I'm comparing to, because I'm thinking about, like, I watch a lot because I get very inspired by it. Bohemian Rhapsody,
sure.
where Rami Malek played Freddie Mercury. Like I'm just like blown away at this, how that performance went down. And in that case, what you're saying is that that's not a just a charming, but he had to go and become Freddie Mercury, right? And like study.
Yeah. And he had similar characteristics to a certain degree. Like when you watch him in I, Robot, you're like, oh, I see. There's some of him that bleeds over. He has some of that stuff already that makes him like Freddie. And then he had to work obviously with the teeth for a while
Yeah,
to be able to talk
yeah,
like the
yeah,
teeth, keep natural. I'm sure he worked with the teeth at home for weeks. He didn't walk on a set, they click some teeth in, and he goes, I'm ready to go. Like that's not what happens, right?
right.
And you have to stay at home. You watch the tapes. You watch Freddie Mercury. You practice Bohemian Rhapsody in your living room every day in front of the mirror. It's like, woo! And like
Yeah,
practice the
yeah,
moves, right? You have to become him, right? You have to understand all of that. Look, do you have to go hook up with a bunch of dudes? I don't know, maybe. Like, it's like, it's a
yeah,
choice you need to make, right? Uh,
right.
you know, um, and that's the whole thing. It's like, and I'll go back to like when I did Happy. An example of that is my character had a 40-pound coat filled with ornaments that was really heavy. And I said, I need to wear that for a few days. And they go, well, you're not working until like Thursday. I go, I want to wear it now. Like I need to move around. I need to fight in this coat. I need to be like a superhero. I need to figure out how this weighs me down. Am I going to stomp around? I can't be a ballerina in this thing. Like I need to be able to know how I move, right? And I wear this every day. It's the only outfit I have. So I need to feel this. So I went to set, even though I wasn't on the call sheet, and I went there for 3 hours or 4 hours a day, put on the coat and walked around set, and moved around and talked to kids and started to feel the weight of that and bring that to the character, because otherwise it will be clumsy. It will not seem natural. It will not become part of me. And if I'm worried about the coat and how I'm moving, well, how can I actually be natural as a character, right? If I'm worrying about the coat, if I'm tripping over the thing, well, because if I trip, your natural instinct is to go back to who you are, like, oh my God, right? But I have to feel so comfortable in this that I don't break character. And how does that make my head move? And what other elements? And on the coat, there was a stocking hanging off the coat, right? And I had it. There were some kids there, and I put the stocking in my hand and started talking to the kids with the stocking, and that became part of the character. And then in episode 7, there were a whole episode around the hand puppet, because it's something that I just worked on. If I didn't go there 2 days early, that would have never happened. You know what I mean? So you have to spend time developing the character, becoming one with everything. And like you're saying, if it's a historical character, even more important, because people already have a preconceived idea of what that person is, right? Some ways it's easier because you know what you need to achieve. Other ways harder because you need to emulate it effectively, right?
And
From creating something different, it's different.
and in your world, do you find it more difficult for people to do that in terms of like going to become that character as far as the craft is concerned? Is it more challenging that way versus just jumping in and you getting to be, Joe Ugly that you are and just yourself?
I mean, look, if I'm
Or
playing a guy that's really close to me, I can just do it off the cuff. It's
yeah,
a
yeah,
lot easier. But is it, the more interesting question is like, is it harder to become somebody, to create a character that's so far away from you that has no preconceived notions, or becoming Lincoln, right? I would find
it's the one I thought about too, by the way. Lincoln is who I was thinking about. It's funny, we're on the same page, man.
yeah. Daniel Day-Lewis as Lincoln is like, you're
Yeah,
like, I can't do that. I'm not going to lie to anyone. Like I would come across not as good as he does. I mean, he becomes the guy, and that's amazing. And I think that's really, I play characters like, I might be like, this character's like Lincoln, and I might sit there and be like, let me tell you a story 7 years ago. And I would start with a character that had an element of Lincoln. And that might be where I started with something, but I'm better at creating a character and borrowing from Lincoln and then borrowing from somebody else,
right.
I borrow from 5 or 6 different people and create a character. I would not be as good at being somebody. The only person I almost played, I think it was Allen Ginsberg, was a role that I was up for. The Chicago 7 that's on Netflix right now. 10 years ago, there was a different version of it, and I was up for Allen Ginsberg, and I had to like study Allen Ginsberg and go in for the audition.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I've auditioned for that. I've auditioned to play Rasputin, the Russian oligarch. And a few auditions where I've had to study to do that stuff, but the truth is, I'm better at playing something that no one's ever seen before.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you have like, what you were bringing in there was sort of an eclectic approach, right? It's like I can do 5 different things from this, which lends to your individuality of how you approach this whole thing, which is great. On the top, by the way, what I also took away from that, which I hope people that are listening catch on to was research, practice, absorb the role, like fundamentals of the approach to what it takes to successfully execute that role. Now, drawing that into your other areas of life, I'm not talking about you, I'm saying in general, right? It's like, how do you take research and process and practice and apply that to
Real life.
business and relate? Correct. Exactly. Exactly. So,
Well, this is kind of twofold. So here's the thing. So the first thing that I do as a teacher, there's a great there's a guy named Stanislavski who's like the grandfather of acting. He created like kind of what's considered the method, which is what like Brando and James Dean do. It's the idea of like encompassing a character and making all these decisions, which I've talked about. My number one rule is when I book a job is that I am no longer the teacher. I make myself the student, and everything that I teach my students, I make myself do, right? So that is a big part of my process is I teach this every day, and I would be a hypocrite if I wasn't willing to do it myself. I tell my students to go beg for money on the streets of New York. If you're playing a homeless guy, I will beg for money on the streets of New York as a homeless guy, right? If I need to play a baseball player, I need to go to batting cages to practice. I need to like do what I would tell them to do, right? And I treat myself that way. I go, what would I tell myself to do? I step back and I do that. So that's part of my process too, is stepping back and being like, people come to study with me. What would I tell myself?
yeah.
As far as like things that cross over into other areas, it's tough because a lot of the skills that I have are not useful in any other way. But like, I think it's super important, partially, as we've discussed, right? I make choices as a character every day. There's no reason why I can't make choices in my daily life. If I choose to have a positive day, or I choose to be proactive, or I be fearless, I need to make choices to do those things. I don't have to live in the place of fear if I don't choose to. I don't have to go into a meeting and be scared if I choose to, right? So I do apply that to that. There's also something called the vote system, which I use when I teach actors all the time. And in the vote system, the idea is, what victory you're trying to achieve, in a scene. What's your obstacle? What tactics do you use to overcome that obstacle? What's the best and worst end result? Truth is, I can apply that to anything in my life.
Yeah,
what's my goal?
absolutely.
What's my way? How do I get around it? And where's the scale on, what am I at risk, right? Risk versus reward, right? So I use that occasionally when I'm sitting there going like, okay, well, what do I need to do here? I need to figure that out.
Yeah, I'd pick that book up and start reading it, man, because if you're a student of life and you're trying to figure out ways to do it better, and what you just said is brilliant. It's a formula, right? It's a way of you having brought your own recipe together, and now I'm like, oh, I'm looking for a good recipe here. Let's try this one out. I like that. I like that a lot.
So that's part of like what I teach and part of what I try to do in my real life as well. I also sit there and Alfred Hitchcock said all great movies start at a desk. And I think that's with all great plans, not just movies, right? If you have a game plan, you sit down, you work out your bullet points, and you kind of like figure out. Planning is a big part of success, right? You just sit there and be like, I'm just going to run with like a chicken with his head cut off. You can only get so far. You might get lucky. You might, right? Sure. But knowing the plan for the day allows you to excel and possibly do better than the plan for the day if you know what your plan is. So I think those are the main things I do.
Yeah, look, dude, you're bringing some heat, man. I mean, in terms of the goodies that you're talking about here, I can bring 6 or 7 different points in right now. One of the things that I don't want to let escape us, because we sort of joked off with it, and I also want to be mindful of your time. We joked off and around it at the beginning, which was the drugs and the alcohol and the being sober. I was at the bookstore yesterday, and I walk up to check out, and I think was it Time, or I forget which magazine it was, but regardless of it, they had the 3 different areas where it says the leading cause of death now in, I think it was the Americas, if I remember correctly, don't quote me on this, could be wrong, of people under 50 was drug overdose and drug addiction. I was like, wow, like it is now starting to overtake. Well, I think before it was drunk driving or alcohol or something like that, but now it's drug addiction, overdose. So obviously that's been a big part of our lives in the sense that we've experienced it and overcome it, and we're talking about the character of life and acting. And then at that time in your life, because I'm curious about how it went for you. Were you trying to avoid yourself? Were you trying to be a different character in those days? And I don't want to spend a lot of time because, dude, we could spend all day here talking about Hollywood and acting and teaching and drugs and all the rock and roll and everything. So let's try to bring some life to it so we can have a thorough conversation around it where, again, I'm just coming to you from a place of, I'm just curious, what it was that was going on at those times. And then that moment where you said, you know what, maybe that I don't want to be that character anymore. Because then, you know,
I was
whatever.
young. I mean, I started, I was using in high school and college, and then when I got to LA just opened up more doors and more opportunity to use. Really,
Yeah.
In school, I had a schedule, and I knew when I could kind of like go off that schedule, right? When I got to LA, as soon as I got an agent and I was waiting tables, I was like, well, now I just have to wait for the phone to ring. And that was a real problem for me. Because as far as I knew, that was as far as you could go with your career. I'd done what I needed to do. I have the agent. Now what do I do? Now I can't do anything until they tell me I can. That partially is why I started teaching eventually. But because I felt like I didn't know what to do next. And I feel like I should help people with that. That's where I've ended up. But at that time, I was like, well, now I just have free time. And I was depressed and I got sad that I wasn't getting auditions. And I started just using a lot of drugs and drinking to suppress that depression that I was having and frustration. And then when I wasn't booking jobs, I was able to go like, oh, well, I'm fucked up. So,
Interesting.
that's why I'm not working, because I'm fucked up. I'm talented. I didn't deal well with the 95% rejection rate of acting. Like, it was really hard for me. And I didn't know why everybody didn't love me and didn't want to make me famous overnight. It was very confusing for me.
Were you so caught up in your own hype because of what you thought was a talent that you had, or were you just misinformed? Like, what do you think that was?
God, that's such a hard question. I think it's both, because I think I really thought I deserved it. I still think I deserve it. I mean, I think I deserve, I do a great job when I work, and I wish people just gave me more work.
Right.
But I can't control that. And once again, back to accepting the things. And then, but I think it was hard for me not to be handed it, and then it was also hard for me not to know what to do. And idle hands are not a good situation for
That's
me.
a fucking nasty place to be right there, dude.
Right?
Yeah.
And I'm bad with idle hands, and I sit there and I'm like, to have that to be depressed and feel like that self-oppression of being like, what, I don't know what to do, and I feel stagnant and depressed and nobody loves me mentality led me to a bad place. Led me to a place where like I also enjoy danger. I also I'm a big fan of I like chaos. You know what I mean? I like drama. You know what I mean? Innately, I try to keep drama out of my life now. At 22, you know what I mean? Ranging from the kind of girls that I dated to drug deals gone bad. It was like all riding my motorcycle at 4:00 in the morning in Hollywood, like coked out of my mind, and just kind of like heading to some model's house because her boyfriend is on location someplace else. And you're like, I'm living the dream. Like at 22, swear to God, you show people what I was doing at 22, your average 20-year-old kid would be like, that's amazing. But it was dangerous and destructive. And when you break it down, it's a good movie. It's a bad lifestyle, right?
Sure.
And at the end of the day, like my usage, I never got to the point where like I was stealing or broke or lost my apartment or living on the streets. But I was not chasing my dream anymore. Like I was derailed in a place of sadness and being like, what am I supposed to do? And I was very lucky to have my teacher, Doug Warhit, who's a very nice guy in LA, who's a very good teacher, acting teacher, and therapist, oddly enough. He does both of those things. Yeah. He's like, you might consider getting sober. I'm like, that's not my problem. And he was like, you might want to look at it, and I was like,
It's a good impression. I don't know the guy, but that's funny.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And I was like, okay. And I did look at it, and he was right. And I had to rethink my life. I just had to rethink my life. It's so weird. Like you can really, I don't know if you can, but I was just depressed, and I made a phone call, and then I made another phone call, and he goes, he goes, maybe you should go to an AA meeting. And I go, what's the number? And he goes, 411, which, you know, for those children listening, 411 was information.
Yeah.
Dial. We didn't have Google, but
Yeah.
I dialed 411, I asked for Alcoholics Anonymous. They connected me to a phone number. Somebody answered. They told me where a meeting was close to my house. And, you know, and that was like, that changed my life, really. That was
How did you know? You said, you know, he said you should try the sober thing. You said, yeah, I don't know. But how did you come to the conclusion that that was the answer? What was the information, the insight in there that made you like,
I was in my apartment with no furniture except for like a bed and like a table that I kept my cocaine plate on. And there was cocaine on the plate and a bottle of vodka in my hand. And I called my acting teacher. I'm like, why am I not famous yet? Like, that was like the conversation. Like, you know, I mean, when you think about it out of context, you're like, it's the stupidest thing in the world. Of course you know, like, but that's, I mean, I was living in Hollywood. I was waiting tables and bartending. I was dealing drugs. And I was kind of like, I'm confused about why things aren't just as great as I thought they were, you know? Why are my dreams not coming true? And I wasn't doing 2 things a day for my career, and I was being self-destructive, and I was like, you know, and I was just kind of like on cruise control, you know, basically on vacation, being fucked up until somebody was going to call me and tell me to show up someplace. And I was like, you need to, and look, you know, I'm not going to tell you anything you don't know. You know, success is what? What's success?
First of all, I think it's subjective, so it's your definition of what you think it is.
Right, but it's preparation meets luck, right? There's a lot of that, right?
Yeah,
you know,
correct.
By the simplest definition, right?
Sure.
Preparation meets luck. You know, it's kind of what we always say success is, right? You know, there's obviously a billion moving pieces inside of that, right? Right. But I wasn't preparing. You know, I was hoping just for luck. You know what I mean? And that's not impossible, but unlikely, right? You know, so I realized pretty quickly. For me, I went to a couple meetings, and beyond the meetings, I realized in my own head, I was like, I am putting hurdles in front of me that are slowing me down from winning the race, and I need to remove the hurdles. This is a bad hurdle. Get rid of the hurdle. You know what I mean? Right? And that was a big part of it, the biggest part. And then, you know, because I can sit there, I'm like, I can be scruffy, I can be 400 pounds, I can be anything, but if I am fucked up and I'm not focused and I'm not moving forward, it will not happen. You know? I'm not beautiful enough just to be plucked out of obscurity.
Right.
You know, it's like, you know, I mean, cute. I was cute, but I wasn't going to just all of a sudden become overnight and sit there and be like, it's not like I'm Megan Fox and someone sees me at Starbucks and went, would you like to be in a, you know, not happening. Right.
Yeah.
You know, so, and look, I've applied my skill, and my skill is now my biggest calling card, you know, is that people sit there and go, Joe knows what he's doing. And that's, you know, Joe's prepared. Joe can save the day. You know, like if something goes wrong, he's going to help. You know what I mean? He's reliable. You know, he's going to be a tent pole. He's going to be a general on the field if he shows up. All those things, right? You know?
Absolutely.
And
I like that.
It's different. It's a different game. The funniest part of this story for me is when we deal with this idea is that before I got sober, I would audition to play drug addicts when I was fucked up and I couldn't book the job. And as soon as I got sober, I started booking drug addicts. And I was like, that tells you like acting isn't just about being fucked up. Like acting about part of it is like they need to trust you that you're going to show up to set, you know, not that you're just a fucking train wreck. That's not good enough. I'm like, but I am a train wreck. I'm perfect. You're not perfect. You're not perfect because there's more to it than just being fucked up on this.
You know, it's you know, having this conversation really brings it back to light. I think that I'm guilty of, like, I think, you know, 5 years for me next week, actually.
Wow.
Believe it or not, 5 years. I know you got almost, like, how many, 20? Are you plus 20 now? 20 plus?
27 in
27. Yeah. So fuck, a quarter century, right? For me, I'm guilty of like being so far removed from it that I forgot how big the problem is. Like, dude, when I read that headline, I was like, shit, man, this is making headlines now. That's something that you and I have got good at. And like, we can just sit here and like, I don't need a drink. I don't need a drug. I'm having a grand old time. But that person right there and that person right there are fucking struggling, man. So it's like, we got to do something about it, right? We got to bring some more.
And look, you know, I've been fighting to get off of like pharmaceuticals, like entirely, you know, in my entire life, and, you know, from Ambien to whatever. And look, you know, the cannabis industry is fascinating. I've read up a lot on it. You know, what do I think makes sense in that, you know, as far as like CBD goes or THC or what levels make sense, you know, what I'm in a place in my life where I don't have a desire to get high anymore. right now. But I do have a desire to be able to sleep soundly,
Sure.
take, what does it mean to be able to take something like Xanax to find your levels, opposed to like, is there CBD that will help do the same thing? You know what I mean? Like melatonin to get me to sleep. I want to go with homeopathic concepts in my life to make sense.
Sure. Sure.
Alcohol is off the table because I just think it's detrimental to your. I think it's the worst. I think alcohol is the worst.
Yeah. Dude,
You know?
I was doing some research 2 days ago on because I'm always trying to hack the brain and make it bigger and open it up, unlock it. I shit you not. I pull up an article, and these crackheads, and I had to throw that out there, wrote that one of the ways to unlock your brain. Now I don't know whether it's true or not. I could give a shit less. Was to drink some alcohol. I was like, I literally went to the top and I clicked the button. I was like, I'm out. Because if you're suggesting to me that I drink, and I get it, right? It just kind of releases you and maybe it can provoke some creativity. All right, great. But I don't need that. And so I was just incredibly turned off by it. But nonetheless, you're right. I think there's a fine line between the substances, because again, that can become addictive. If it's too good, you can get addicted to that one thing that makes you feel real good, like caffeine, right? I have a cup of coffee over here. I'm drinking it every day. I
Yeah.
purposely stop drinking coffee so I can break the addiction. Because it's
You
like
have a
anything.
migraine. You have a migraine for 2 days. You get a headache.
Yeah, it's like, damn, dude.
Yeah.
Yeah, golly. So,
And look, my dog. So, well, we're getting off the subject, but like when I was doing a movie in New Orleans, and I started getting stomach issues, and I went to this doctor and came back to LA. He goes, you have something called silent reflux. You have an acid issue with your stomach. I'm like, what? I goes, and he goes, how much coffee do you drink? And I was holding a Trenta from Starbucks in my hand, a Trenta, not even the biggest bucket. I was like, a lot. And he was like, and he opened up the trash and he goes, coffee's off the table, throw it away. He goes, and then he looked at me and goes, do you need a meeting? And he didn't even know it was over. And I was like, I'm like, son of a bitch. And I threw the coffee away. I haven't had coffee since. I drink some pre-workout energy drink stuff in the morning, which has caffeine. I haven't had a problem since I threw the coffee. The coffee was the biggest issue. He was right? That was the biggest acid producer. So like the caffeine has not been as bad as that. So I have found a balance. But once again, like I gave him the coffee for like a week and I was like, I slept 12 hours a day. I was like, what's wrong with me? You realize how addictive you can become to something that simple. How do I find that balance in my life? How do I find a balance so I can actually do certain things, live my life? And this is how I feel about, for example, something like Vicodin, let's say, right? I'm doing a movie. If I'm doing a movie and I'm playing, I have to do my own stunts, right? And I get hurt, right? Doing the stunts. And I have to go to work the next day and I have to do the stunts. And I have to not feel the pain, right? It's a discussion that you have to have. As I'm not taking the Vicodin to get high, right? I'm taking the Vicodin so I can perform the way I need to, throw punches, not have my back hurt, and do what I need to do to go through the day. And I might hurt more tomorrow because of it, right? But I can't stop the movie from happening. And I need to understand that I can't take so much Vicodin that I can't deliver my lines to be the character. So like, there's an interesting place. Now, if I am using something that is a drug, right, to be able to, and I'm saying like not to emotionally stable myself, right? Not to affect myself so I'm okay with it. But if I'm using things effectively to accomplish the goals that I need to move forward, then it's acceptable. But I can't be on my couch the next day and be like, I'm just going to take one because I'm just chilling and I'm good. That's not okay. I have to work through that pain. I have to figure out why it's hurting me. I have to I have to go to physical therapy. I need to work the back out. I need to figure out what has to happen. But it's important constantly, because this is the thing. I got sober to improve my life, right? And it's to understand what that means to me. Right? I mean, and I think everyone does have a different opinion on what that is for them. Some people will be like, I'll never take another, I won't even take aspirin. I'm like, well, that's your call, man. Like, I'm going to make sure that my life moves forward the most effective way it can, and I'm not going to stop myself from achieving my dreams. I need to finish that movie, But I did a movie in Mexico and they wanted to give me a cortisone shot of my hip before I went, and I said no. What I also don't want to do is lie to my hip and have this phantom, not know that my hip's there and slowly grind it down so I can never walk again, right? He's like, well, it's either that or you take the pain pills in case you get hurt down there and do what you want to do. And I'm like, and I make a rule to myself. I have a rule with my pain pills is I have to tell somebody if I take one, right? So I would have to call you and be like, I'm taking a Vicodin today. you know, that makes me accountable for it.
Yeah, sure does.
You know,
Sure does.
right? So I can't just be sneaking Vicodins and being like, it's okay. Talking myself can't because I can't talk to my voice in my head because my voice in my head will be like, take them all.
Yeah.
Take them all today. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
you know what? You worked really hard yesterday. You shouldn't feel any pain today. Take two. Why don't you have a couple donuts? Right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so it's like I try to make myself accountable for all choices that I make in my life.
Yeah. Look, I think it's an experiment, man. I think we're constantly in the laboratory, really just kind of working on new formulas, working on pre-existing ideas. Like, dude, I was here the other night at my desk and I'm thinking to myself, like, I got to work on some emotional boundaries I've got that are flared up right now. It's avoidance, it's running from this, it's doing this. I'm like, damn, I've been doing this for almost 5 years, man. Back here again, working on some new stuff. It's
Yeah,
again, it's just like the constant, you said it constantly is the word you used, constantly trying to evolve and develop and find what works best, right?
yeah, man. I mean, because it is an experiment. Life is an experiment, right? The key is you just, look, money is not the answer to everything. I know that, I know you work really hard at the business that you do. And I know that, but I believe I'm not financially driven, that might be a bad thing. But I found in my life, like, if I teach 3 people a day and I make $300 a day of teaching or $400 a day teaching, I don't have a bad life. I've never had a bad day doing that. I've never
Right.
had a bad day making $300 a day. You know what I mean? If that's what I do, and that
Right.
isn't every day. Some days I work more. Sometimes I'm working on a movie, make a lot more.
Right.
Sometimes I, don't make any money. But it's like, some days I coach people for free if they're screwed. Like you don't know. But I do happen to know, like when I sit there and go, like, well, what is the quality of life that makes me happy? That tends to be a place where I'm like, never had a bad day when I did that. You know what I mean? And I look at that, I go, it's if you can be happy, what else do you freaking need? Like, I'd rather be happy than have $20 million. And I've dealt with people who have tons of money, who are horrible people and
Miserable.
miserable,
Yeah.
right? And I'm
Yeah.
sure you have too, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You're like,
Yeah.
God, you're so unhappy. You're slamming the door to your like Rolls Royce and you're so mad, and you're taking it out on other people. Like, I never want to be like that.
Right.
If I don't have enough money here, I can move to Europe or Mexico and my money goes further and I can live that life there. You know what I mean? I
But you
think
have,
that,
but you have the equipment, the makeup of being able to look, regardless if you got to that point. Like I said at the beginning, it's about skills, right? You have this skill, the mental ability to go and make money, dude. I mean, that's like, just like learn, be a student, dude. Do what you talk about. Like, you just jump into
and
the student's role, go figure out how to make some coin.
and yeah, but even with that said, it's like, to think that I'm in a position in my life where like one of my biggest skills is that people want knowledge from me
Mhm.
is such a beautiful thing. Like the fact that I can make a living as much as I want to. I could start a school. I could expand my acting classes. I could do all that. If I really want to be a full-time teacher, I could grow a school, right? But that is not where my heart is, right? But I do, and I am appreciative, and I'm grateful and humbled by the fact that people come to me for advice. Right now, I mean, I think that is such a gift to recognize that that people look to you to help guide them, right?
Absolutely,
Uh,
man.
it's
Absolutely.
it's beautiful, it's
Yeah.
absolutely beautiful
Yeah.
to sit there and be like, oh man, it's like, I've lived long enough that people like trust my opinion, or
Yeah.
whether it be look at my headshots or help me with the audition, or what do I do with this agent, or would you represent me? Would you be my agent my agent because I don't trust anyone but you? You know, it's it fills my heart, it fills my heart, and
Yeah.
I don't think it gets better than that. So you take a look at that, and like I said, man, all my students know I'd rather be on set, but I'd rather be acting myself or directing my own stuff, and they know that. And they know that if I'm gone for 2 weeks, that's part of the gig. It's like I'm qualified to give them advice because I am doing it, and I'm not just lecturing,
Sure.
pretending. I go out there too.
Yeah, dude, but not like I said, man. Not only have you lived it, do you have the resume to support it, but you have the purity of the delivery and the essence of what it takes to be a good teacher, man. Again, that's a rare combination, man.
Yeah.
And you said beautiful. The beautiful thing is that big old hairy fuzzy stuff on your face, man. That lends itself to the whole Joe ugly. You know how to bust your balls for that one, man.
That's all right.
Have some fun with it.
But it's one of those also amazing things too when you sit there and you think about it I can tell you, I have a student whose job is kind of like to help me with my social media stuff for like my classes, and every month she makes something for me to post, and every month I have to be like, I guess we need to post another thing, and I'm against it. Like I believe like people will show up, because I don't want to go down this path where I have so many students that I lose myself in just being a teacher, because I have such high expectations of like what else I can do with my life. Even though I think this chunk of it is great. I want to write scripts. I want to direct my feature. I want to give more. I want to be able to maximize my time in many different areas. I tell people all the time, I go, I am constantly distracted by shiny objects. Like I love something and I want to just do it, and I don't want to be trapped. I don't want to create a prison for myself where I just teach people. Sure. But man, the fact that it is 20 to 30% of my life is great.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, look, man, I appreciate you for jumping on here and teaching us today, man. I was a student. I got schooled by the man himself. So, dude, it's truly is a blessing. I got one last question because
yes.
Obviously this is the Always on the Grow podcast. So, what does that mean to you? Always on the grow. What would you say? Whatever comes to mind.
Always what comes to mind when you say always on the grow?
and no filter, man. It's all good, by the way.
Yeah. Always on the grow is, to me, is exactly a lot of what we're talking about. No steps backwards, right? No retreating. So it's the idea, always on the grow means that I'm always willing to accept what's coming into my life and willing to become more from it, right?
I love it. That's beautiful, man.
And I think that's the thing, man. Flowers, you just don't want flowers to die, right? So they just need to be fed. A flower or a plant is a really simple thing. Water, sunlight, right? That's all it
sure
takes.
Is. Sure
if they're
is.
able to follow that, they grow. And like I said, that's two things. And basically, always in the grow means every day stepping forward. And like the conversation we had before, if that means just going out and getting some sunlight for the day, right? And taking a walk to clear your head, or if that means, sending an email to somebody who could possibly open up a new door for you, whether it may be spiritually or intellectually or whatever it may be, that's always on the grow. So it doesn't matter. Always.
Dude, that's a damn good answer, man. That's like a really good. It's almost comes from the depths of philosophy. You stepped into your philosopher shoes right there and brought it home, man. You brought home the wisdom.
Yes,
I dig it, man.
Yes, grasshopper.
Cool. Put it there, man. Since we got this virtual thing. Appreciate you, man.
Good talking to you. I haven't seen you it's been too long.
Yeah. I'm gonna stop recording and we can continue to bullshit off here. For a few minutes, but
like 5 minutes. Yeah, what's up?
Yeah, you're amazing, man. All right, brother. Appreciate you.